Another day brings yet another unexpected chapter in the basketball universe, and this time, the atmosphere in Los Angeles took on a different weight. The environment around the franchise became dense, heavy, almost as if everyone were waiting for a sudden shift at any moment. The defeat to Oklahoma exposed flaws that had already been whispered about behind the scenes, but now they had taken concrete shape. With LeBron's return still insufficient to reorganize the team's structure, it became clear that something larger was unfolding. The squad looked disconnected, the rotations lacked flow, and the paint showed unmistakable signs of fragility. Even with big names on the roster, the team lacked physical presence under the basket, and that detail had been costing them dearly game after game. From that scenario, specialists began to point out a pattern. There was no impact in the front court, no one capable of holding the line where the game becomes more physical. And it was within this context that a name resurfaced in the backstage conversations. A player who had already caught the franchise's attention in the past, and who now returned to the agenda with more strength than ever. The possibility of bringing in Daniel Gafford became more than a rumor. It turned into a move that made sense both technically and strategically. Dallas were going through a turbulent moment, and the unexpected departure of their general manager opened space for internal questioning about the future of several players. When approached by the press, Gafford did not hide his readiness. He made it clear that, if he were moved, he had a preference for reuniting with a former teammate who helped shape his playing style. The atmosphere in Dallas seemed unstable, with the team accumulating poor results and the front office showing signs of a deep restructuring. If the losses persisted and the team remained below expectations, the decision-makers would consider changing virtually the entire roster. And that opening created the perfect environment for the Lakers to try to advance in negotiations. Meanwhile, far from Los Angeles, another storyline was boiling at the same time and gaining traction across social media. Anthony Davis became the center of a storm of rumors, and speculation about his possible departure sparked strong reactions from supporters and analysts. As valuable as his presence still was, there was a growing section of the Dallas fan base, yes, rumors involving a supposed move, arguing that trading Davis would be a smart decision, a way to renew the squad and acquire young pieces and draft picks to build the future. It was a discussion no one expected so soon, but one that was exploding rapidly. Investors close to the league reinforced that Davis would not be difficult to move. According to them, interest in him was real, consistent, and long-standing. Several teams were said to have made calls trying to understand what the price would be for acquiring a player of his caliber. And among those teams emerged a name that instantly captured all the attention: Golden State. A franchise accustomed to big moves, always searching for the piece capable of elevating the level of the squad. The idea was simple and frightening at the same time, uniting Davis with Curry and Butler, creating an explosive combination, an offensive and defensive force so great it could completely reshape the landscape of the league. It was not an exaggeration to say that such a formation could enter conversations about historic super teams. Moreover, Davis had already stated in previous interviews that he wanted to play alongside Curry, something that had always remained in his mind as an unfulfilled wish. Now there was a real possibility of it happening. The problem, however, was the cost. For Golden State to absorb a salary that high, it would be necessary to give up several important rotation players, perhaps even promising youngsters who were starting to gain space. And that became a dilemma. To what extent would it be worth sacrificing depth for a star who, despite being dominant, also carries an injury history? The front office knew they needed to act cautiously, as any mistake could cost them years of rebuilding. But at the same time, ignoring the opportunity would be almost unforgivable. The league works in cycles, and this could be the last major move capable of placing the franchise back at the top. With every new update, with every comment from an insider, the atmosphere grew more tense. Fans began to split, journalists questioned the viability of the trade, and executives from other franchises evaluated how such a negotiation could impact their own competitive landscape. Pressure mounted on both sides, the Lakers trying to strengthen their interior defense with the potential arrival of Gafford. Golden State, flirting with the possibility of forming a devastating trio. And at the center of it all, Davis watching every step closely, knowing his future could change drastically at any moment. The combination of these unfolding events created a dense narrative, full of layers, as if the entire NBA were on the verge of entering a new phase driven by decisions capable of redefining whole seasons. And behind every conversation, the same question remained. Which moves will actually happen? Which ones are just rumors? And how far are franchises willing to go to secure a winning season? As the hours went by, the atmosphere carried the feeling that something big was being quietly cooked up inside the offices of the franchises involved. In Los Angeles, the front office met to evaluate scenarios, alternatives, and possible returns. It was not just about strengthening the paint, it was about correcting a structural weakness that had been sabotaging the team for months. Every detail was being weighed with caution, from Gafford's explosiveness to his chemistry with the current roster, including the possibility of adjusting the style of play to maximize his presence near the rim. The team desperately needed someone with immediate physical impact, and the chance to acquire a player willing to do the dirty work seemed more valuable than ever. Behind the scenes in Dallas, the internal reorganization intensified. The departure of the general manager created a domino effect that many specialists had already predicted, but which was proving even deeper as new information emerged. Players who until then seemed secure began to appear in trade rumors. The atmosphere was one of total uncertainty. No one knew for sure who would stay, who would be traded, or what direction the franchise would take in the coming months. It was precisely in this chaos that the Lakers saw a rare opportunity, the kind that only appears when a giant of the league enters turbulence. As the market heated up, the story involving Davis took on almost cinematic proportions. The mere fact that his name was circulating as a possible trade piece already left part of the fan base uneasy. The debate went beyond tactical considerations. It hit directly at the emotional side of supporters who found themselves split between two conflicting feelings. On one hand, there was recognition of Davis's talent and the impact he delivers on his best nights. On the other, there was a growing fear that his presence might delay a necessary renewal to reposition the franchise in the coming years. Inside Golden State, conversations were no less intense. The possibility of building a combination featuring Curry, Butler, and Davis was not just attractive, it was transformative. But at the same time, there was the inevitable concern of dismantling key pieces that held the collective structure together. Executives knew that a move of such magnitude could not be made hastily. Technical, financial, and even psychological impacts needed careful evaluation. A roster that is shaken too much can lose its identity, and the franchise had always treated that with extreme caution. Even so, the prospect of having Davis in their sights awakened something that had been growing within Golden State, the urgency to restructure in order to compete at a high level once again. Time was passing, and championship windows do not stay open forever. Executives viewed this as perhaps the last major opportunity to build a team strong enough to surprise the entire NBA. The arrival of a dominant presence in the paint would solve long-standing defensive problems and breathe new life into the offense, offering rare versatility, something only special players provide. Meanwhile, the Lakers watched everything with a mix of expectation and anxiety. Any move from Golden State could directly affect the plans in Los Angeles. If Davis truly became involved in a trade to another franchise, the impact would echo throughout the entire conference. Moreover, if the team were to lose such an important figure, it would need to accelerate the search for an equally capable replacement. And that is precisely where Gafford's name made even more sense. He might not be a fully established star, but he offered exactly what was missing: strength, speed, leaping ability, and a willingness to protect the rim every minute he was on the court. The internal discussions also revolved around the possibility that Davis was indeed inclined to a change. Old comments, past interviews, unfulfilled wishes, everything resurfaced now that a real opportunity seemed within reach. The idea of playing alongside Curry was a massive temptation, not only because of the complementary style of play, but also because of the chance to compete for titles without carrying so many defensive and physical responsibilities alone. This detail, often ignored, mattered. Players of Davis's caliber look for balance, impact, prominence, and support. Golden State could offer that. And the more these elements aligned, the more electrifying the situation became. The NBA thrives on moments like this, when the pieces begin to move slowly and, before anyone realizes, a chain reaction takes over the entire league. Analysts were already imagining future scenarios. How would the Lakers reorganize their roster without Davis? How would Gafford fit into the system? How would Golden State adjust its defense to incorporate a versatile big? And above all, which would be the first domino to fall? The media naturally fueled the fire. Every statement, every gesture, every absence from press conferences was interpreted as a sign. Fans were torn between nerves and excitement. And within the franchises, nobody released any clear information. The backstage became a silent arena where every decision had to be calculated down to the millimeter. Moves capable of reshaping the entire league depended on conversations taking place far from the spotlight. But one thing was certain, none of this was happening in isolation. The Gafford situation, the rumors about Davis, the pressure in Los Angeles, the urgency in Golden State, and the instability in Dallas were all pieces of the same puzzle. A puzzle that was beginning to take shape even though no one could fully see the final picture yet. The tension continued to rise as more details emerged behind the scenes. The Los Angeles executives knew they were facing a turning point, perhaps the most important since the arrival of names that once changed the franchise's direction. Every internal meeting felt longer, heavier, as if each decision-maker understood that a rushed move could jeopardize the entire season. And at the same time, keeping everything as it was would be just as dangerous. The roster needed physical presence, needed energy in the paint, needed immediate impact. And Gafford represented all of that, but his possible arrival did not depend solely on the Lakers' desire. Dallas was dealing with its own identity crisis. The departure of the executive responsible for most of the team's recent decisions created a huge vacuum within the organization. Without firm leadership, discussions about major internal changes multiplied. Players who once seemed untouchable began appearing in trade reports. And Gafford, due to his high market value and interest from several franchises, naturally emerged as a central piece in this restructuring process. For Dallas, trading him would mean creating room to fix financial issues, reorganize priorities, and chart a new direction. For the Lakers, it would mean filling an urgent gap. Meanwhile, Davis's name spread through every corner of the league, amplifying the chaos and connecting every storyline almost inevitably. It was impossible to speak about the Lakers, Golden State, or Dallas without mentioning him. A potential move involving a player of his caliber never goes unnoticed. It cast a constant shadow over any strategy being considered. With each new rumor, with each comment from someone close to any of the franchises, the entire scenario took on new colors. Golden State, in turn, faced a peculiar dilemma. The idea of building a new explosive combination, an interior force capable of shifting entire games, deeply appealed to the organization. The possibility of reconstructing a lethal core once again placed the franchise at the center of championship discussions. But the decision carried a heavy price, giving up important players, disrupting part of the roster, and altering the internal chemistry that had sustained the team for so long. It was like staring into an abyss, enticing and dangerous at the same time. Internal debates grew larger. Analysts highlighted the risks of investing in a player who, despite being brilliant, had dealt with physical inconsistencies. Executives questioned whether the investment justified years of potential sacrifices. At the same time, other areas of the franchise viewed the trade as a once-in-a-generation chance to revitalize the team and give Curry the support he deserved. A window like that would not open again anytime soon, and ignoring it could be a costly mistake. Meanwhile, Davis became the central piece without even moving. His long-standing desire to play alongside Curry gained traction, reviving discussions about stylistic compatibility and the destructive potential of a duo formed by one of the greatest shooters in history and a dominant big man capable of defending with versatility. It was a fit that made sense both technically and emotionally, something rare in the league. But the franchises knew it wasn't just about assembling talent. It was about making the pieces work together. That's why, despite growing excitement, Golden State sought to examine every scenario, imagining how each piece would move on the court and what adaptations would be necessary for the team to maintain identity, rhythm, and cohesion. While all of this unfolded, one crucial element solidified behind the scenes: the interconnection of the decisions. Gafford, Davis, the Lakers, Golden State, Dallas. No move could happen in isolation. It was like a huge chessboard where shifting one piece triggered a series of consequences. A potential trade for Gafford could directly impact Davis's market value. Any attempt by Golden State to advance a deal increased the Lakers' urgency to strengthen their front court. And any decision made by Dallas could trigger a chain reaction across the conference. Then, as the tension climbed, a new perception began to form among executives and analysts. For the first time in years, three franchises might be moving simultaneously in directions that could converge at a single point of impact. The season, which had started with moderate expectations, had now become unstable ground where any bold move could completely reshape the balance of power. The Lakers, aware of this growing interconnectedness, began considering even broader scenarios. What if Davis's exit truly gained momentum? What if the team urgently needed not only to reinforce the paint, but also to replace offensive leadership? Gafford would help, but he wouldn't be enough on his own. They needed to think beyond that, imagine secondary reinforcements, adjust systems, redefine roles. A physical presence in the paint was crucial, but the team would also need emotional stability and leadership to cope with the weight of such a departure. Golden State, analyzing the same situation, also realized that Davis's arrival would radically change the team's dynamics. Rotations would need to be reorganized, responsibilities adjusted, and a complex tactical system taught to a new defensive anchor. But if everything clicked, the result could be devastating for opponents. Dallas watched from a distance, yet with clear interests. Every rumor involving Davis strengthened its bargaining power. Every move by the Lakers or Golden State altered Gafford's market weight. Their internal rebuild depended on monitoring these external movements. The team wasn't just negotiating players, it was negotiating its own future. And this is precisely where the stories intersect perfectly. Three franchises pressured by expectations, each with its own urgency, each needing to make fast but extremely calculated decisions, all tied to the same thread that connected the entire market. At 22 years old, a young Filipino center has been turning heads wherever he goes. With an imposing stature, refined skills for his position, and impressive body control, Kai Sotto is not just another player trying to make it to the NBA. He represents a rare combination of talent, size, and ambition. Standing 16 meters tall, he already carries on his shoulders not only the expectations of his nation, but also the promise of something greater, to become the next big name in Asian basketball on the international stage. Kai Sotto is much more than numbers and statistics. He brings a playing style that blends the traditional characteristics of a center with a modern touch of versatility. He not only protects the rim with authority, but also knows how to create offensive opportunities with creativity and court awareness. His offensive repertoire includes consistent mid-range shots, well-executed hook shots, and above-average court vision for someone in his position. He also shows strong defensive instincts, especially when it comes to contesting shots and covering sensitive areas in the paint. But when we talk about joining the NBA, and more specifically becoming part of one of the most strategic franchises in the league today, the Golden State Warriors, the game changes completely. The competition is fierce, the pace relentless. The physical and tactical demands are pushed to extremes that few leagues around the world can replicate. And it is in this context that the potential arrival of Kai Sotto to the Warriors roster becomes a fascinating prospect. The transition to the NBA is often challenging even for the most experienced and highly rated athletes. Talent alone is not enough. One must know how to use it under pressure against faster, stronger, and more prepared opponents. For Kai, this would mean entering a new phase of his evolution as a player, where every practice, every minute on the court, and every decision during a game would matter. His history in international basketball, having played in leagues such as Japan's and Australia's, has already shown glimpses of his potential. However, the NBA is a world apart, and the true test is yet to come. Within the Warriors' system, Kai would have the opportunity to develop alongside some of the sport's most renowned names. With a coaching staff known for their ability to refine talent and an offensive system that emphasizes smart movement, game reading, and versatility, he would have the ideal environment to explore the upper limits of his development. Training daily with top-level veterans, participating in complex tactical schemes, and being tested in high-pressure situations would be decisive factors in his journey. But what truly makes this possibility intriguing goes beyond basketball. The cultural connection between Kai Sotto and the Bay Area is deep and symbolic. The San Francisco region and its surroundings are home to one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines. His arrival in this setting would mean much more than a simple signing. It would represent a point of unity between a globally renowned team and a passionate fan base eager to see one of their own shine on basketball's most prestigious stage. The impact of this union would be immediate. The Chase Center, home of the Warriors, would become a stage for not only sports celebrations, but cultural ones as well. Fans waving Philippine flags in the stands, cheers in Tagalog echoing during games, and a contagious energy coming from an entire community that would finally see itself represented at a high level in the NBA. It would be a unique experience for the franchise and for the league as a whole. Beyond the on-court effects, Kai's arrival to the Warriors would open significant doors in the commercial landscape. The NBA has been increasingly investing in the globalization of its product, and athletes who can connect different cultures become valuable assets for any organization. Partnerships with Asian brands, increased viewership in Southeast Asian countries, and new possibilities for digital engagement would be just some of the natural consequences of this union. However, one cannot ignore the harsh reality that accompanies any young player trying to establish themselves in the NBA. Even with talent, dedication, and a favorable context, the margin for error is extremely small. The Warriors' roster is carefully constructed to maintain competitiveness at the highest level, which means that every spot must be filled by someone who delivers immediate results or has a clear potential to evolve rapidly. If signed, Kai would have to prove in a short time that he is up to the challenge. His adaptation to the fast and physical style of the American League will be crucial. His reaction speed on defense, physical conditioning to endure the grueling schedule, and understanding of positioning within complex systems are all factors that could define his success or failure in the league. He will need to show that he can handle mobile power forwards, heavy centers, and defensive schemes that demand constant switching and effective communication. However, there is one factor that may work in his favor: his hunger to learn. Kai has already shown in his international journey that he is not afraid of challenges. He left home at a young age, faced different cultures, battled experienced opponents, and kept his dream alive even in the face of adversity. This resilience is one of the most valued qualities by teams like the Warriors, who prioritize players with a growth mindset. If the signing materializes, the rewards could be long-lasting. In just a few years, Kai could establish himself as one of the cornerstones of the Warriors' new generation of players, alongside other young talents the franchise has been working to develop. His presence in the paint could solve structural issues for the team, especially regarding rim protection and physical presence against opponents who play a more rugged style in the key. In a team that often relies on the precision of its shooters, having someone with his height and defensive instincts could bring even more balance to the lineups. Coach Steve Kerr's vision of the game, based on off-ball movement, quick passes, and intelligent defensive switches, would require Kai to make a continuous effort to adapt. He couldn't just be a big guy standing in the paint. He would need to be agile, have good game reading, and communicate constantly with his teammates. This ability to adapt to the team's dynamic rhythm would be vital for him to earn his place in the rotation. Off the court, Kai's image would also carry symbolic weight. In a league that celebrates diversity and inclusion, he would become the face of a new phase of Asian representation. Just as names like Yao Ming paved the way for future generations, Kai could take on that role for the Philippines and other Southeast Asian communities. His rise would not be solely athletic, it would also be cultural, emotional, and inspiring. Even with the risks involved, signing Kai Sotto could be a strategic move that yields significant rewards. The bet wouldn't just be on who he is today, but on what he could become in the years to come. And that, in itself, is enough to justify the Warriors' interest.